Mafia is a series of games that competed in the same circles as Grand Theft Auto, Saints Row, and other games of that sort. Coming out around a year after Grand Theft Auto 3, Mafia and Grand Theft Auto are kind of cousin games, with Take-Two Interactive having owned both Rockstar for Grand Theft Auto and Illusion Softworks for Mafia. Basically, these games, while similar, weren't meant to really compete at the end of the day. They're serving the same shareholders. Mafia definitely didn't get refined in the same way as those Grand Theft Auto games were, though. The console port of Mafia is a total mess, with clunky controls, awkward shooting, and terrible draw distance. Originally, I was going to do my due diligence and play the original and the remake for this video, but the original just showed its age so much in the 2 odd hours that I played that I decided, fuck it, I'll just do the remake. I don't have the patience Aiden does for that, for sure. To the original Mafia's credit, its driving is quite good, honestly, especially for the time, and I would argue that if it was a driving game first, it may have turned out better, but the overworld running was way too clunky.
They're like half tank, half not. Very weird controls.
Regardless, we will come back to the original in this video, so hang tight on that. I've played Mafia for a few years now. As a kid, I downloaded the Mafia 2 demo on Xbox 360, which would allow you to explore a chunk of the overworld for up to 12 minutes before you had to get in a mission or buy the fucking game. But I was definitely interested in the game. Being like 12 when the second game came out, I didn't exactly have the funds to buy the game, so I just abused the demo for months till the game made its way down to the bargain bins for 20 bucks. And yeah, I liked it a lot when I finally played the full game. So in probably 2013, I figured I would test the PS2 port of Mafia 1, and it wasn't very good as I stated. So I figured I'd probably never get around to playing it. But then, conveniently, in 2020, Hangar 13 decided to remake the game. Hangar 13 is a division of Take-Two and further 2K Games that is a combination of two studios, 2K Czech, and two other smaller studios that merged into Hangar 13. This is notable because 2K Czech made the original game under their original title, Illusion Works. So basically they figured it was about time to touch up the game that started one of their main series, Mafia, and bring it up to the graphical quality and quality of life standards of 2020's video gaming. Mafia takes place over several years in the early 1930s as you work your playable character Tommy up from being a taxi driver to a full-fledged mafiosa. The game follows the same story as the original Mafia pretty closely, at least up to a certain point I played, but it did a lot of remixing to streamline and make it more akin to a modern third-person, open-world, car-based action game. Grand Theft Auto clone. Anyhow, Tommy joins the Mafia after driving a taxi for a bit. The turn happens when Tommy escapes some pursuers and flees to Little Italy. You continue to be harassed by this rival gang before finally saying fuck it and messing up their cars. This portion also sees you learning some early melee combat, something that occasionally comes in handy. You start shaking people down when Sam is injured, which takes you to our first big shootout at the motel where you learn to use a fairly tight shooting and cover system. This mission ends with a car chase that's pretty intense, but it's fun. It was kind of shitty in the original game, but in this version you just drive while blasting his car till you disable it. Get used to this format of gameplay. After this, you get more acquainted to the driving. You have to do a car race in a little buggy, and this shit's hard as fuck. It's just hard to drive with precision with this type of speed. A lot of these cars in the overworld are pretty slow since it's the 1930s, so these puppies max out at like 50 miles per hour typically, and that takes quite a while to get to. Once you beat this though, you have a brief aside to kill a few gangsters that harass your girl, but the next large mission is the Saint and the Sinner, which sees Tommy infiltrate a large hotel building and kill lots of enemies. This is a little hard, since combat is occasionally kind of jank, but it's a really fun mission, culminating in a shootout on a roof of a hotel, which leads you back to a mob funeral, which also starts getting shot up. So you have to slaughter a lot of enemies in this really cool church building. In the next mission, the action continues as Sam has gone missing and you need to investigate a barn to save him. But the rival gang arrives right before the cops show up. At this point, the game's story more or less becomes shooting galleries. This definitely isn't The Godfather, and no one's here for the story, evidently. Following this, you have a shootout in an airport, then a stealth mission at a judge's mansion that leads to a car chase and a little shootout, then a parking garage shootout followed by a car chase, then a shootout on a boat, and then a shootout in a harbor, back to the airport for another shootout, assassinate a senator, and then get into a shootout, then car chase, search for a diamond, get in a shootout, go to a bank, rob a bank, get in a shootout, and finally go to a museum where you get into a shootout. The game ends on Tommy being killed by Vito and Joe from Mafia 2, which tie into the game's sequel, after Tommy turns out to be an informant for the government. It's worth noting that when this game came out, these two characters were unnamed, though it was confirmed to be the pair in Mafia 2, but this game makes it clear from the jump. Though it seems those two were at least designed to look like the leads of the potential sequel that ended up becoming Mafia 2, because the two characters that come up to assassinate Tommy, though unnamed in this game, look strikingly similar to Vito and Joe from the second game, so likely that was already kind of in the cards. Mafia Definitive Edition's gameplay is definitely a pretty solid step up from the roots of the original game, implementing quality of life improvements from the past couple decades, as well as just some more fun experiences. Obviously, the graphics are a big step up naturally, since the original Mafia has serious draw distance issue and was a mid-life PS2 game, while this game came out late in the life of the PS4 that can run on the PS5. Beyond that though, the original was a pioneering game in the GTA-like genre, and because of that, the gameplay went through some growing pains. Look at me trying to shoot this guy point blank.
R1 to shoot, right? It's R1 to shoot, bro. Tell me you want to play a full game of that, please.
And him not dying because I was too close. The driving is good in the original, being that games were already able to do in early 3D gaming pretty well, and all they had to do was polish up that type of mechanic. But the combat especially is so janky, and the controls are just kind of awkward. This game uses modern cover shooter mechanics, and the game controls more like Rockstar's equivalent games. And while the cover system isn't perfect and occasionally can be a bit janky,
That's such bullshit! The cover system is so bad in this game.
This game is diarrhea coming out of my dick. This game is as appealing as a fucking ooze-infested, dirty fucking sewer rat shit. I've had more fun playing with dog turds.
it's definitely an improvement. Mafia Definitive definitely doesn't really add much to the genre that hasn't been done before, where the original was helping to pave the way for a new subgenre. With that said, I feel like it's a solid improvement from the original, which its biggest flaw is really not being optimized to where it should have been, and the fact that the genre is just getting its footing, so a lot of combat and movement is still a little janky as there are growing pains naturally. The Definitive Edition has a health chest system rather than an auto-restoring system though. When in the red, it'll restore a tiny bit to allow you to have a small buffer, and with health packs being so few and far between in this game, it's occasionally difficult, but the challenge feels totally fair to me. It also has some pretty solid looking graphics and cool environments that make you really feel like you're in the time period. I think the main three Mafia games as well as the remake do a really solid job at this, and I'm glad that attention to detail and immersion is done well here. The combat hand-to-hand takes some getting used to. I still think Mafia 2 had the best hand-to-hand in the series overall, and I may have liked them to take another crack at that system, though it's definitely not as modern feeling, locking into combat encounters the way you do in that game. There are some minor variants, but really, there are 4 gun classes. Pistols, shotguns, rifles, and Tommy guns. The Tommy gun packs a punch and is fast with a drum clip. It's very powerful, but it's hard to aim. The shotgun is really solid at close range, but it can be hard to use if you aren't in close quarters, hallway combat, or sneaking up on somebody. The pistol is the most well-rounded of the group, being able to fire pretty quickly, having decent range, and being the easiest to land hits with, though it's not as strong as the shotgun or as quick as the Tommy gun. The rifle is uncommon, but it's pretty decent, a little slow, but it's strong and easy enough to aim. Not a lot of options from a gun perspective, but it works well enough, and ammo management is definitely an important thing to manage. It's not stingy, but you won't feel like you can just mindlessly spray. You kind of have to pay attention to your shots and try to tactically retrieve ammo as you go. On top of that, there's some secondary weapons like bats and knives for melee, or grenades and molotovs for crowd control. The gameplay is good in this game despite being occasionally a tad jank, but it improves in every aspect over the original, given the years between this entry and the original. Doesn't really break new ground in the game genre, but it'll work to keep you immersed in the world while also being a bit more challenging than a lot of the modern equivalents. The enemies move around between cover a lot and don't just sit there to be shot. They also are pretty good at hitting you quickly, so you have to be fast. They're kind of stuck in an area, and it's really easy to evade them. Also, if you run into the next checkpoint, anybody behind that checkpoint just immediately disappears if you die. So that's a good way to cheese the game a bit. On that final museum level, at one point I just ran past a checkpoint so I could get through it quicker.
Survive the ambush, huh? All I gotta do is survive? Let's see. No one's really coming after me. I got a blicky. Got about 28 bullets in that blick. Oh, okay. That's the time. You got a pretty good fucking round on me. But I survived. Doesn't matter if I die because I hit the first checkpoint, which means... Am I just gonna charge the exit? Okay, so I'm just gonna die. Oh, I made it like 3 checkpoints in.
And these enemies aren't often chasing you or searching for you or anything like that, but they can evade pretty well and change cover points, which can make it kind of a pain in the ass to hit them. And they'll try to actually lock you down, so the AI mechanics are actually pretty solid for the most part. Cops will also try to give you a ticket first, then arrest you. And you can get caught up if you just drive by a cop too fast, or of course if you crash into another car or something like that. The cops can occasionally be hard to get away from when you become wanted. You essentially need to drive really fast to get away, or hide until they forget about you. Alternatively, if you want to do it quick and risk it all, you can hop between cars, often having to steal a locked car. You can either smash the window or pick the lock. If you're caught, start running and do it again. That's kind of the stealing mechanic. It's very repetitive, but it's a fun change in setting and set pieces to keep it fresh. The game overall is very repetitive, but it's fun, and the change in setting and set pieces keep it fresh, since the arenas and zones are really well crafted and have a lot of detail to them to kind of immerse you in the time period. It's definitely not something I could rush through in like one sitting, but going piece by piece and doing a couple missions a day is fun, since the gameplay is really fun and solid overall. Graphically, the game looks much better than the original game, which had some issues with draw distance, but is also dated by now, falling deep into the 6th generation of video games, along with being larger than a lot of the games of the era, making it look incredibly dated, which especially gets expanded when putting these graphics shoulder to shoulder with contemporary games like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas or Vice City, which managed to be optimized a bit better. This game isn't like some crazy graphical showcase, but it's really solid. Character models are pretty good, if not the craziest of the PS4, but the world, textures, rain, water, and cars look really solid. It comes together well enough for me, at least, to be pretty immersed in this period piece. Musically, the game uses songs that sound very jazzy and work well with the 20th century setting, with people like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington playing throughout the game. Mafia Definitive Edition has a well-made open world, cool cars, fun chases, fun shooting sections, and well thought out combat zones. The game is definitely fun in its gameplay if repetitive, and the mission's difficulties vary almost entirely on the combat zone. The game didn't do a great job subtly ramping up the difficulty. It is very much the same thing, difficulty-wise, throughout the game, with some of the hardest missions coming mid-game, with You Lucky Bastard probably being peak difficulty in the game for me. After that, the rest of the missions are relatively easy, definitely harder than Mafia 2 from my memory of beating that game a couple times several years ago. However, even with the game's repetitive nature and lack of side content, it's still a solid GTA-like game that does a good job of putting you in the shoes of a gangster from the 1930s, which is kind of the peak of the Italian Mafia, at least publicly. That's the time we see adapted the most. I don't know a lot about the history of the Mafia and stuff, so don't ask me, I could be totally wrong. But the 1930s are a solid time to choose to adapt. This remake seems really faithful from what I can tell, with it really following the mission structures for better or worse. At times that makes the game lack the flash of some modern AAA titles, but as a kid I grew up in the era of this game, so the lack of set pieces and modern flair doesn't really bother me. I've played a lot of shooters like this, and while it's repetitive, they put you in beautiful and fun arenas that add to the 1930s vibe of the world. Graphically, it brings the original to the modern day, and while these games aren't GTA levels of scope and budget, this game looks great, especially in the cars and world. While human graphics aren't like the best thing, they're solid, and I would say for the budget of the game and the size of the game, they're pretty good. It feels like an PS2 PC shooter. It's just cleaned up for the modern age, and I like that. Is this game perfect? No, but overall I enjoyed myself with Mafia Definitive Edition, and this is a great example of a modernization of an older game that didn't want to deviate from the original, but just to improve and modernize for the new audience. Plus, it makes a better fit with the other two games, which also saw re-releases with graphical upgrades for Mafia 2, but not being a ground-up remake, and a Game of the Year style DLC included re-release of Mafia 3, which all three you can buy in a bundle as the Mafia trilogy. Makes the whole series fit together better as a cohesive bundle, and it's nice to return to the world of Mafia again. Supposedly another game is in development, and I look forward to playing that one day, as this has been a series I've really enjoyed, being a unique and grounded entry in the GTA-like genre, which often seems a little more goofy than grounded. Anyhow, my next video will be Friday the 13th Part 6. I'm currently working on a longer video that I've been writing and had some developments, so that's gonna have to be adjusted, but I'm starting work on that. My next novel review is in deep development, and my next video game will be Arkham City, so in a few weeks when I can play through that and write a video, that should be out. If you're interested in my thoughts on that series, you can check out my review of Arkham Asylum, which was the first game review on this channel way back.